Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for all things public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local government. An open forum to learn, grow, and develop your public information skills. Your host, Robert Tornabene, is a public information officer with over 10 years in the field and 27 years of law enforcement background. In each episode, we will explore different aspects of the public information officer profession. Weekly, we will delve into the field of public information by talking to other PIOs. So sit back and enjoy this episode.
Good morning. Today on the PIO podcast in episode 42, we are talking to Jessie Brown. She is a social media and communication specialist for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. Jessie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So Jessie, you are the social media communications specialist, and you have done so much. And you were recommended to me by another colleague as somebody I should get on the show. Tell me a little bit more about your background. How did you get to where you're at, and how long have you been doing it?
Sure. I have been with the DNR for 18 years now. So that predates social media, actually. So I've been the lead on that since we really started to throw ourselves into it in 2012, but otherwise doing those wonderful communication, other duties as assigned since then. And I came to the DNR straight out of college at the University of Iowa. And like so many of us, and so many of your listeners, I come with a journalism background. So I'm majored in journalism and mass communication, and then also communication studies. But the most I did in the real world was working for the school paper, the Daily Iowan, and just jumped right into government and PR. And here I am 18 years later. And those that might not be familiar with what Department of Natural Resources does, in our case, we are a very large state agency, and we have an environmental protection side, as well as fishing, hunting, state parks, wildlife, a law enforcement component with our conservation officers, forestry, if I didn't say that. So we cover a lot of topics, a lot of areas.
So you have won, after looking at some of the awards you've won a lot over the years. And this is kind of interesting. So you started in the field with this agency before social media came on. Now you're winning awards and been winning awards year after year. How did social media become something that you kind of jumped in? Because you've been in it for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's sort of odd to think I'm sort of an OG of social media in government. It's 9 years, but sometimes it feels like 30 all at the same time. But yeah, so I was actually part of our first online journalism course at the University of Iowa. And I don't mean that it was offered on the web. It was how to be a journalist and write for the web and build websites and this crazy stuff. So it's just interesting to see the jump from that into just this massive digital world that we live in now. But it comes all back to the things that I learned in journalism school and in those PR classes. It's taking all those principles and just applying it to a different medium, just as we've done with everything else that's popped up over the years, from email marketing to other, even, press releases and brochures, or, it's all applying the same kind of thing. And we were a little hesitant at first as an agency to do social media. We had accounts as far back as I think 2008, but it wasn't anything that anybody really knew what to do with. And by 2012, we could see where things were going and decided, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. Let's be strategic. Let's make it a good effort. And I volunteered as tribute, basically, back then, to okay, I'll figure it out. And now here we are. I just, dove in head first, taking those things that I learned over the years in being a professional communicator, but then also just jumping into all the research, getting involved with a lot of groups like Government Social Media and Social Media Club locally, just to learn the ins and outs and really have that professional development to elevate this. That's another big thing for me, elevating it as a profession. So to get all those rewards and awards have been just really wonderful to see, to have that work recognized and appreciated, that this is a major pillar in communicating with the public now, and to have that recognized, just even as a, hey, you're not playing on Facebook all day, this is a real deal. That's great to see. And I would encourage people to find whatever they can locally, or in things like the Golden Post Awards from government social media, to have that work recognized and possibly help elevate you in your agency, in your jurisdiction, whatever it might be.
That's an interesting point. I don't think enough of the public information officers out there that are in doing social media and stuff realize that it's okay to promote your agency with these organizations where they give out awards, because it only adds more credibility to the PIO and the agency when they are given awards, because it shows that you're doing exemplary work.
Right. And it's just a good encouragement to others who may be at your agency, or it's part still overall that building relationship part of social media. If people see that you're doing it well, it's going to build the brand.
Absolutely. What social media platforms are you using?
Right now, it is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and to an extent, YouTube. YouTube isn't a very strategic one for us yet, but we also don't have a very large pool of resources. It's mostly me running social media. So there are places we'd like to look more, like TikTok, things like that, but also understanding capacity and resource and where our audiences are. So there's plenty to keep me busy right now, just for those.
Are you using any of the social media platforms that are the management platforms like Hootsuite or Buffer to manage all those different accounts?
Sure. We've used Sprout Social for years. And because we are such a large agency with so many crazy topic diversity, that sentence made no grammatical sense, but I'm getting there. It's just been very helpful to have some sort of system, because when I am out of the office, other people can jump in and they don't have to worry about logging into 5 different platforms to respond to people. It's all right there in front of them. There's scheduling in there. So I can keep track of everything. They can see what's coming, or if I'm out and they need to post something in an emergency, it's all there. So I know there are a number of different platforms that do it, but Sprout has been just extremely helpful for us to keep everything manageable.
And I think that's important, especially with a very large organization like you guys and very sprawling in what you do. Having a platform where everybody can go to and see where everything's at, it does make it very helpful. So, and even small agencies can have that as well. There's nothing wrong with having it very consolidated, because then you don't have to worry about, am I posting when somebody else is supposed to be posting?
Right. Especially if you have multiple people working on social media. First, you're incredibly lucky. And 2, yes, and I know Sprout and other platforms too have things built in to prevent redundancies. So you can see if both of you are responding at the same time or posting something at the same time.
I want to go into another aspect. One of the reasons why I did reach out to you is because Emily in Maryland told me that you were a proponent of self-care and the taxing nature of the field. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about self-care and why it's so important.
Sure. So first of all, I always like to start off by saying self-care is important for everyone, no matter who you are. On a very basic human level, it's part of taking care of yourself just as much as exercise, eating right, things like that. It's just a matter of taking care of yourself. So it's a baseline for all of us. But then when you jump into social media as a profession, PIO as a profession, if you're working with a first responder type agency, we all have then elevated levels of stress. And if all of those three things converge, I mean, even more. So social media, again, just not playing on Facebook as people think. It can be just stressful in terms of workload, but we are also the people that get yelled at constantly, often by well-meaning people and not so well-meaning people. And, that can really wear a person down. And we can deal with some really sensitive issues too, in terms of crisis management and emergencies. And if we aren't keeping ourselves in a decent place where we can be resilient and take on that stress a little bit, we're headed straight to burnout. And you've seen that all over the place, not just with us in the past year and a half, because there have just been so many pressures on everybody, even just a background level of stress that none of us have ever experienced before. So burnout's a very real thing, but especially when you're just surrounded with negativity so often, if you can't step away from that, have some boundaries away from your job and recharge your batteries, it's not going to be a good situation for you professionally, or, it's going to spill out into your personal life, and you got to take care of it.
And that's incredibly tough for professionals to tell their leadership or their supervisors, hey, you can't contact me at 4 a.m. or whatever it might be, or I have a family party, I'm going to be unavailable here between this and this. That's setting a boundary. But if you don't set some boundaries, that stress can be devastating for you emotionally. I remember once I got called on a vacation. I was literally about 1,500 miles away from home, and I got called on a vacation, and they're demanding answers on something I said 4 weeks ago in a newspaper article, and I'm like, I don't remember. I don't have the article in front of me. How could I even speak to that? I would have to look it up, and I've got my wife yelling at me at one end, the kids want to go do something else, and I got them yelling at me on the phone. I'm like, I'm done. I'm on vacation. And I hung up the phone, and I'm like, I probably don't have a job when I get home. And, but at some point, and I allowed that to happen, and I shouldn't have, but it is important to set boundaries. And it is important to get away from the office.
Right. And I mean, we live in a hustle culture right now. And we were just talking in the beginning about where we're from, this upper Midwestern work ethic, right? Where you don't say no. Mm-hmm. You work hard and you do it. And so for us, that can be very, very difficult. But advocating for yourself is something that you need to learn to work on. And for us as professional communicators, you think it would be a little bit easier because it needs to be strategic, right? We need to think about our audience. Yes. When we approach our supervisor. We need to be problem oriented, come up with solutions. And part of that too is taking that vacation. So many people, I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but they just let their vacation go unused. As the United States as a whole, we are very bad at taking vacation. And then the thing that also tends to trip us up is a lot of people don't take vacation because that week before vacation is horrible, because you're trying to do 2 weeks of work in 1 week. And then the week that you come back, nobody seems to have minded that you were on vacation and sent you everything that they wanted you to do while you were gone. So it's a bit of a culture shift that just needs to happen at large in terms of recognizing the value of having that time off, stepping away, especially when we have much less vacation to compare to other countries around the world, and we're not even using the little that we have. So building up those systems and being able to advocate for yourself within that system so you can truly get away and recharge, and then not just reverse everything the week you go back and have to do 3 times the work for being away 1 week.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. And that's why I'm going to have Jeff Thompson on in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about self-care steps and what you need to do. And Jeff is phenomenal.
That'll be amazing.
I'm looking forward to having a conversation. Yes, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him on it. So, all right. So you have some advice for dealing with trolls and making mistakes. And I know the phrase owning it is really important, but let's go through each one of those. So making a mistake. Let's talk about that.
I hope so, okay? Because I just made 2 yesterday. I also like to call myself a recovering anxious perfectionist. So mistakes can be very difficult for me. But yeah, you got to lean into it. And oftentimes that can just pay off dividends. I mean, mine was a minor thing where I meant to paste in a link and didn't. So it was just, hey, here's more information. And then there was nothing. So I just played into it and sort of joked with a couple of people that responded to it saying, where's the link? And, moved on. Didn't let it, I guess, bother me. Didn't dwell on it, where previous years that would have really bothered me that I had made that slip up. And that was a minor one. I think of some bigger ones they're a couple years old now, but still work from home. Washington DOT, I think, had the social media cat walk across the keyboard and tweet out a bunch of gibberish. And so often in social gov, we'll be like, what do? We can't have that out there representing our agency, but we can't delete it because of archival and public record. What do we do? So most people would probably just try to let it go quietly into the night. But Mike and his team out there just totally leaned into it and replied to his own tweet and said, well, that was weird. And just started all these conversations with people in his state and surrounding and across the country, actually. But it was just a very good exercise in building relationships because he got to show personality. He got to show the human side of the agency and I guess the feline side, because there was a lot of community building around cats walking on keyboards. And so, really had nothing to do with their agency and their day-to-day work, but it went miles for just building that goodwill. And the same goes for the classic, I think it was a sheriff's office in Colorado that had the large boulder the size of a small boulder. I think that was posted across a lot of places, and they owned it. Spoke right up and like, yeah, we made this mistake. It was I can't remember, it was like a big mistake the size of a small mistake or something like that. And I think they've used it over the years because they got a lot of press and media attention from it too. And the fact that they responded and were having fun with it really went a long way to build up their relationships with the community and other people not in their community.
And I think that's important for us to remember that we are only human. We make mistakes. And sometimes to overcome that mistake, that humor and that making us look human or talk or act human instead of being behind that veil of keyboard is important.
Absolutely. That's one of our main goals in being on social media, is to humanize the agency.
You guys are the DNR, and you have that breadth of across the state and dealing with animals and EPA and all this stuff. You probably do get hit with troll accounts and things like that, specifically like dealing with animals. That usually gets everybody worked up extremely high. How do you deal with trolls?
Well, the first thing I always love to point out is what a troll actually is, because the tendency for so many in social media as a whole, and then especially sometimes in social media for government, is anybody who says something bad about the agency or has a bad attitude or is a little upset is a troll, because they're causing you an issue just because they don't agree with you. And that is absolutely not what a troll is. That is a constituent, a citizen, a resident who has a valid concern that they may not be articulating well. And again, we have to remember so many of us are under this giant blanket of stress that we haven't been under, and people cope in different ways. And unfortunately, one of them is anger. It's not a healthy coping mechanism, but it's a coping mechanism. And so we need to realize that trolls are out there only to incite chaos. They absolutely do not care about your agency. They do not care about whatever issue you're talking about. They just want to get people riled up and sit back with the popcorn and watch the comments burn. They don't care at all. So it's super important for a social media person to be able to discern the difference between when a troll is doing that and the appropriate response, where maybe it's reporting them to the social network for violating their terms of service. Maybe it's just ignoring them because there's not anything you can really do to address the concern. But if it's somebody who is, Leslie Knope said it best, carrying at her loudly, right? It's people who just aren't articulating well, and they probably really care a lot about whatever issue this is. And if you can meet them with some sense of empathy, it's going to go so far for you personally, because then you aren't triggered and riled up and starting your own back and forth argument with them, and hurting your own, self-wellness by dealing with that. A lot of times you can surprise and delight that person, because I've heard many times from people that they didn't even expect us to respond, let alone respond kindly and educate them on the issue. The other thing is, some people we will absolutely never satisfy or make happy. And they do tend to pick up some of those troll things where they're commenting on, it's an issue related to your agency, but they start commenting on every post or things like that. So those people we might not ever make happy. But when it's a public comment, especially, you have an audience of potentially hundreds of thousands, maybe, people seeing that comment and what you're responding to, that you never know they're there, because they don't interact with it in any other way other than reading it. But you are showing them that you can respond kindly and respectfully. You can educate on the issue. You might not get to that one person, but you're telling everybody else why things are and why you do things the way you do. And that's really worked out well for us, where we've had a couple of hot button issues over the years. Like, people don't like when we cut down trees, because we're natural resources, right? But trees don't grow in prairies. And so if we're trying to maintain a certain ecosystem, we might have to cut down trees. And so people get upset over that. But I've seen over the past few years, we get fewer and fewer questions about it. And when we do, now we have brand advocates that jump into the conversation, and they start explaining habitat management to these people before I get an official response out. So taking that time to deal with those negative comments just goes so far in building those relationships and educating people. And if you're just ignoring negative comments, you're really missing a whole lot of opportunities for growth. And then I should throw in the disclaimer too, that I am not an attorney, and this is a whole other podcast in itself, but don't go deleting those comments because they are speaking poorly about your agency. Don't hide them. There are some legal precedents that's the same as deleting. Blocking is a whole other thing. So keep in mind too, government has First Amendment rights that we have to keep under consideration, even if they're saying some really horrible things. Unfortunately, that can be protected speech, and we have to let it be.
Right, absolutely. So can you elaborate on the three and out rule?
Sure. So whether it's somebody carrying at you loudly, or somebody who just has a lot of really good-natured, honest questions about a subject, we as social media managers don't necessarily have all day to answer 30 follow-up questions. And especially with me, with such a large agency, I'm not a wildlife biologist. I'm not an environmental specialist. I went to journalism school. So I have to lean on a lot of people to answer technical questions. So generally by the third time they've come back, if we can't answer all their questions or resolve the issue, that's time to give them a phone number, because it's going to be more satisfying for them if they can have a conversation with somebody who can answer all their questions and really talk them through things a little bit better than we can with a back and forth ping pong on social media. And if it is somebody who's really upset, sometimes that's what it takes to sort of stop them in their tracks. It's sort of, it's really easy, right, behind a keyboard to say whatever we're going to say and be as mean as we want to be. But if we have to talk to a real person in real time, then maybe I'm not going to do that. So sometimes that sort of puts an end to the rant, but other times those people follow through and call. And again, it's continuing to build those relationships. And a lot of people are pleasantly surprised when they learn why we're doing something, or just the fact that we took time to listen to them, whether it's on social media or on the phone. Just being heard is important to a lot of people.
Great way to sum that up. Appreciate that. So let's lighten this up. We'll go to some rapid fire questions here. Your favorite go-to cocktail?
Don't have cocktails often, but when I do, it would be a gin and tonic.
Name one person, living or dead, whom you'd like to meet and why.
This question is really super hard for me. And I'm going to throw it back to the social media thing for one quick thing, because we answer so many questions every day. There's a lot of decision fatigue where, I'm making 300 decisions just answering people's questions. So when it comes to something like this, where there are so many options, I just can't pick somebody. So I'm sure there are some very important historical figures and religious figures and ancestors that I should talk to, but I'm just going to go for like the low-hanging fruit, because I'm a big REM fan and I've been really deep diving into a lot of the old albums lately. So I will say Mike Mills or Michael Stipe or any of the guys from REM.
Excellent. What is a must-read book in your mind?
That's another, I just have trouble picking one thing, but I will say this winter I read Tuesdays with Morrie, and it was one that I plucked off of my dad's bookshelf after he passed away a few years ago. And I'm glad I waited those years before I read it. And I know he found it to be a very moving book. And there's a whole lot of self-care when you think sort of big picture in that book in terms of just how to approach life and what's really important.
Excellent. Favorite food?
That either has to be my grandma's homemade chicken and noodles, which I have tried years to figure out how she made it, even though she told me how, and I still haven't gotten there, but I'm getting close. Or my other grandmother's super simple recipe for elbow macaroni and home canned garden tomatoes. Those are my two main comfort foods.
What is one thing you can't do without?
I'll put a big self-care bow on this and say downtime.
No, we can never, downtime we can all use. Right?
Always.
Absolutely. All right, some final thoughts. Anything you'd like to add?
I think just realizing or helping people get to that point where self-care isn't something that sounds frilly or like new agey. It's just part of what we do to take care of ourselves. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy or crazy, just finding ways to recharge our battery. And we're all dealing with a lot, and we have a stressful career even before 2020, right? So making sure you're reaching out to people if you need a little bit of extra help, and not feeling any shame in asking for that or advocating for yourself at work. Just really encouraging people to take care of themselves that way.
Excellent. And Jessie, how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about you or possibly connect in some way?
I would say probably Twitter. So it's @JBrown, just like the color, social.
And I will put that in the show notes so everybody, if they want to connect with you, that they can. Jessie, thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate your wisdom here and your background. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
And that was Jessie Brown, social media and communication specialist from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to contact the show, please email us at thepiopodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get notified of the latest episode. If you are listening on a platform that allows reviews, please give us a review. We appreciate any review, good or bad. It helps us improve on each episode. Until next time, be safe.